Please welcome once again, John Denver.
Yes, I got it. Thanks. Thank you very much. I have the same glasses, and I'm very, very happy to have this opportunity to share a few thoughts with you this morning. This was unexpected. I only was found out about this last night, and am very happy to do it, although I should tell you that the only course I ever failed in my life was a course in college on extemporaneous speaking. So somehow that just kept popping up through the night as I lay awake trying to think what it is, given this incredible opportunity, that I would like to share with you. And I think that it does have to do with choices in action. I hope that by my presence here I can express to you choices in action. I hope that what I have to say is an expression of that, and I'm sure that there will be other expressions that you will experience not only from each other, but certainly from me through the course of these 3 days. When we were up on the mountain for our brunch, Jay talked about the glorious day that we had, and he said we didn't choose that. And in the chance that I had for a few remarks, I disagreed with him, because I believe that we did choose this day, that we, in fact, together, and with a whole lot of people who aren't here, obviously, and who may not even know that we're here, we did create this day. And I would propose to you that by our choice, by our simple, willful choice, that were it not as bright as it is out there, that it could still be that bright in here, in each of our hearts, if we were to choose to make it so. And certainly, we have a lot of help, a lot of support in that area today with the day that we have been given. I have a little story. What kind of August have you had? What kind of year have you had? And most especially August. August has been hell for me. For about 7 or 8 years, and and it all came to a head for me a little bit about a week ago, and I really wondered whether I was going to be able to make it here again. And I was reminded of a story that a friend of mine told us on the road about 3 guys who I think were with National Geographic. And they were off in some dark part of Africa or someplace on an expedition, and they were captured by what they thought or had been told would possibly be headhunters, cannibals. And these 3 guys were scared to death, and they were staked up to 3 stakes in the center of this village, and around them were 50, 100 people with bones in their nose and spears and all kinds of things, and they were just working themselves up into a frenzy, and these guys were scared to death. And all of a sudden, it grew quiet, and the chief stepped forward, and he went up to the first guy, and he said, "You wish death? You wish macumba." And the guy said, "I don't want to die. I don't know what macumba is, but I don't want to die. I choose macumba." And the chief said, "Macumba!" At which point some guys stepped forward, cut him off of the stake. They picked him up over their heads. They dragged him off. This guy started screaming. The other 2 couldn't see him. He was going on in the crowd. There was dust being raised. I mean, it sounded like they were doing terrible, unspeakable things to this poor fellow. And as the screams got quieter and quieter, everything else got louder and louder. They couldn't imagine what was going on until pretty soon it got all quiet again. And the chief stepped up to the second guy. "You wish death? You wish macumba." The poor guys, "God, I don't know what happened to my dad, but I don't want to die. I don't know what to do. That's macumba." And the chief said, macumba! Same thing. Unspeakable, terrible things were obviously happening to this poor fellow. Got quiet again. Stepped up to the third guy. You wish death? You wish macumba? The guy said, I ain't afraid of dying. I ain't afraid of macumba, but I choose death. The guy said, very good choice. But first, macumba! So it occurred to me sometime this past weekend, as I was really in as deep and dark a place as I think I've ever been, when I've been told and when I can feel that all kinds of really wonderful things are starting to happen in my life, that I've taken a wonderful step in my life for myself, that wonderful things are happening, showing up out there in my business. They haven't come to fruition yet, but I can see all of this stuff happening. And yet here I am. I mean, I can't tell you all the stuff that's going on for me this month of August. And it occurred to me that God was saying, John, it's wonderful things going to happen for you, boy. But first... So I wanted to share that with you in case the same kind of thing is going on in your life. It can add a little levity to the situation. And for all of us here this weekend, when speakers, out of whatever circumstances, are not able to show up or something goes wrong, I know and I feel deeply in my heart, and I also feel by the attendance, as Jay mentioned, that's here this week, that there are wonderful things in store for the family of Windstar. But first, macumba! So, a part of what that has taught me this weekend is about acting and reacting. And one of the lessons that I've learned over this past year that I wanted to, at least in part, share with you, is I've learned that I've spent most of my life playing a victim. And that I know when I'm doing that, because I really don't like myself very much, and I really find that I'm pretty upset, generally angry at somebody, and it shows in every way that you can imagine. And I believe that it comes from playing a victim, from reacting. So one of the choices that I have made, a conscious choice, a choice, not an educated choice, which assumes a certain kind of response, I think, but a very conscious and willful action about how I want to be in the world. And I no longer want to be the victim. I will no longer be a victim. I was given my assistant, Stephanie Ryan, sent me this wonderful thing a couple of days ago. I guess it was actually Monday when I got home, and she knew the kind of weekend I was having last week. And she sent me this from the Chicago Daily News, dated February 5th, 1960, by a fellow named Sidney J. Harris. I walked with my friend to the newsstand the other night, and he bought a paper thanking the newsboy politely. The newsboy didn't even acknowledge it. A sullen fellow, isn't he? I commented. Oh, he's that way every night, shrugged my friend. Then why do you continue to be so polite to him? I asked. Why not? Inquired my friend. Why should I let him decide how I'm going to act? As I thought about this incident later, it occurred to me that the important word was act. My friend acts toward people. Most of us react toward them. He has a sense of inner balance, which is lacking in most of us. He knows who he is, what he stands for, how he should behave. He refuses to return incivility for incivility, because then he would no longer be in command of his own conduct. When we are enjoined in the Bible to return good for evil, we look upon this as a moral injunction, which it is. But it is also a psychological prescription for our own emotional health. Nobody is unhappier than the perpetual reactor. His center of emotional gravity is not rooted within himself, where it belongs, but in the world outside him. His spiritual temperature is always being raised or lowered by the social climate around him, and he is a mere creature at the mercy of these elements. Praise gives him a feeling of euphoria, which is false because it does not last and it does not come from self-approval. Criticism depresses him more than it should because it confirms his own secretly shaky opinion of himself. Snubs hurt him, and the merest suspicion of unpopularity in any quarter rouses him to bitterness. A serenity of spirit cannot be achieved until we become the masters of our own actions and attitudes. To let another determine whether we shall be rude or gracious, elated or depressed, is to relinquish control over our own personalities, which is ultimately all we possess. The only true possession is self-possession. That blew me away. That's exactly the little lesson that I had learned, I think, over the weekend. I've been trying to learn over this past year. And I forget. Doggone it, sometimes I forget. And it's the funniest thing that'll come up and remind me, and I can say, oh, I forgot. When we talk about making conscious choices, then I want you all to really underline for yourself that it doesn't have only to do with the things that we often talk about here at Windstar, the way we cast our vote, the way we spend our money, the things we teach our children, the things that we put forward in our own lives. It can have to do with much more subtle levels of being, and that you can in fact be who you are. That not only is okay, it's what is most desired. And that in that is the greatest opportunity that you will have to make a difference. That's the only difference that you can make. There's nobody else but you that can make that difference. I remember back in the late 60s when we were talking about wanting to make a difference in the world and how individuals could make a difference. And I know how much that permeates something that I'm so very passionate about, which is the environmental movement and saving our planet, saving our future. And I've often thought that, you make a difference anyway. You can't help but make a difference. You make a difference by what you do. You make a difference sometimes by what you don't do. And that the opportunity that is there for all of us is to make the difference that we consciously, willfully wish to make. And that it can truly show up in every aspect of your life, and that it can do so in a way that takes all the weight off. There's nothing that you have to do. Just be yourself. Another little story that I think underlines this, Tom Crum, my dear friend Tom, who in my absence last year stepped forward and took my place, suggested that I might do the same for him this year. I hope that I don't have to do so to quite the extent that he did for me last year, but one thing that I can do is share one of Tom's little monk stories with you. This has to do with the monk and the samurai warrior. Little monk sitting on the side of a mountain, very calm, wonderful, sitting there. Little bald. Can you see Tom in about 20, 30 years? Little bald head. Same bright blue eyes, same smile, sort of like Al Wong's. Parchment-like skin, clear, beautiful, sitting there. And this samurai warrior comes up. And he's got his sword out, and he's got long hair, and he's got armor and all kinds of stuff. I mean, he comes up and he's got an attitude. And he comes up to this monk, he stamps his sword into the ground. He says, "I want to know the difference between heaven and hell." And the monk, in this quiet little voice, starts to belittle this man in ways that you can only imagine. He says, "Who do you think that you are to deserve any answer from me about any question that you might be so presumptuous as to think you could ask of?" He starts going at this guy in a way that totally is negating him in a sense. And as the monk in his little quiet voice continues to talk, this guy gets redder and redder in the face, and stiffer and stiffer, and angrier, and it's all coming out, and pretty soon he grabs up his sword and he raises it like this to strike the guy, and the monk says, "That is hell." The guy all of a sudden has this flash of realization at how true what the monk has said is, that he has created out of this simple man in his response to a question, himself being in hell. And as he realizes that, as his sword slowly comes down, his face softens and tears start pouring out of his eyes. And the monk says, "That is heaven." So, I've been creating a hell for myself, off and on for a long time. I'd like to publicly apologize to any of you who I have dragged into my little world of hell. And I promise to you that I will make every effort. In fact, more than every effort, it won't happen again. We create our own lives. We create the world that we want to live in. The environment of our own experience and our own expression of ourselves is our creation, no one else's. I would like to share a few things with you that I thought of, that we, out of being who we are, out of having this notion of a thing called Windstar, creating that back in 1976, and out of creating in our own lives the thought that perhaps we could make a difference, and having a sense of what kind of difference we wanted to make in the world, let me tell you a part of what we have created. One thing has to do with another organization that I am considered to be a co-founder of, which is an honor that I don't deserve, I believe, except that perhaps I was the first volunteer. The Hunger Project. One of the things... The Hunger Project says that we wanted to create the end of hunger as an idea whose time had come, and that it was our commitment to end hunger on this planet by the year 2000. And we got laughed at a lot. I sort of fell away from the Hunger Project. I got more focused on Windstar and the environment, not out of my lack of commitment or belief in the Hunger Project and what we're doing. It's perhaps more accurate to say that I feel where I can best serve the Hunger Project is working to save the environment. If you work on the Hunger Project, you're working for a sustainable future and a healthy environment, and vice versa, and a whole lot of other things that we could bring into that. One of the things that the Hunger Project came up with, Dr. Roy Prosterman figured out we have no way to judge hunger in the world. We have no way really to judge hunger as a societal issue. And what he came forward with is what's called the infant mortality rate, IMR. And this, my friends, since 1976, has become the way that we measure hunger as a societal issue in all societies all over the world. At the time that this was brought forward, the greatest, and what the IMR is, has to do with the number of infant deaths in the first year of life per 1,000 births. You get that? In the first year of life, the number of children out of 1,000 who die. The highest rate at that time was in a country called Burkina Faso, which I visited, where the infant mortality rate was 212. In the United States at that time, I think it was about 13. It may be 17 now, folks, here in our country. In any case, at that time, late 1976, 1977, the average infant mortality rate around the world, and we also said, that when it falls below 50, that we can pretty well assuredly say, and this is accepted now, without exception around the world, when it falls below 50, we can say that hunger has been handled as a societal issue in that country. So the United States was 13. We weren't the best in the world, by the way. The highest was 212, Burkina Faso. The average around the world was 160-something. 167 is what's in my mind. I'm not sure that that's exactly right, but well beyond 50. Do you know what it is today in 1995? 63. That may not be accurate. It may be the other way around, 163 and 67. But folks, how close to that magic number of 50 are we? And if we can look at the very real possibility, in fact the probability, I would propose to you, that we're going to end hunger as a societal issue around the world by the year 2000, imagine that. Imagine what it might do to the human spirit to know that we have conquered hunger as a worldwide societal issue. What an incredible thing. And I believe that it came out of some people who made a commitment that we will make the end of hunger an idea whose time has come. And we will commit ourselves to that endeavor. So at the same time, over here, we were creating Windstar. And we wanted to be a catalyst for people to make responsible choices for a sustainable future and a healthy environment. Now, around that commitment, around just that consciousness in the minds and hearts and spirits of a few people, we're not nearly as large as the Hunger Project. Let me tell you some things that have happened in our world, or remind you of some things that just came to my mind about 4 o'clock this morning when I was... The Berlin Wall is gone. Russia, the Cold War, is over. Back in 1988, I think it was, I had a chance to fly to Mir, the Soviet space station. It didn't work out. But this year, there was a very open and very productive and very promising cooperation between the United States and the Soviet Union, as was expressed by a flight earlier this year, an American astronaut with 2 Soviet cosmonauts in the Mir space station. I remember a story. Did you ever hear the story of the guys? There was a flood in this town, big flood. All the people are sitting up on the side of the hill, and they're standing there looking down at the flood and everything. And there's this one place down here where they see this hat seemingly floating downstream, and then this hat turns around and goes back the other way. And they watch that for a minute. The hat goes this way, comes back. And people are beginning to wonder, they're pointing it out to one another. What do you suppose that is? And this little kid pipes up. He says, I don't know, but my dad said come hell or high water, he was going to mow the lawn today. So haven't you heard somebody say something about, yeah, I'll do that, or I'll believe that you'll do that when they're not fighting in Northern Ireland? Can't say that anymore. I believe that, I believe you'll do that. I believe I'll do that, whatever. When there's peace in the Middle East. Can't say that anymore. That doesn't mean that terrorist activity isn't going on, even here in our own country. It doesn't mean that there are civil strifes going on between peoples, even in our own country. But there's not a war going on in the world. You wouldn't say that here in the United States we are at war. So maybe even though there will still be much to do in regard to this issue of hunger, that people will still be starving to death, that the end of hunger will in fact have come to our world. And maybe within that way of looking at things, there will be signs, there will be ways that we can recognize that we have begun to create a sustainable future and a healthy environment. We have a long way to go, but major things happen. What a wonderful thing for our president to take a stand and speak the truth about the tobacco industry. I don't know all the ways that it's going to show up, but I know that it's happening. And I know that it happens in here, and I believe that it's happening from here. And it doesn't have to be painful. The question I'm most asked by people is, what can I possibly do? The problems are so very, very big. And I keep reminding them, and now I'm also reminding myself, you don't have to do everything. But if you do what you can do, what your consciousness, your concern, your vision moves you to do, that can even be easy and something that you do every day. If you do that, and if you do what you can do, and if I do what I can do, and if we can begin to move people all over the world to that way of being conscious in the world, then we will create that sustainable future and a healthy environment.